Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast, High Risk for Heartbreak. I am your host, Christina, and I'm so glad you decided to join me today. For those of you who are new here, I pray you find value in at least one thing I say today. And to my old and very faithful returning crew, you know just how much I appreciate you. So, without further ado, let's jump into it. I read a tweet that said, "You don't really know someone until you see what they do with your vulnerability." Vulnerability is such a triggering word these days, especially when it comes to intimate relationships with other people. We want a place to be vulnerable, to share our innermost with in someone else, but it takes bravery and, that can feel a bit like abandonment of yourself when you're trusting someone else with your innermost. Vulnerability, defined by Merriam-Webster, means that you are capable of being easily hurt or harmed physically, mentally, or emotionally. Now, some good synonyms that I saw from this definition were susceptible, prone, sensitive, and one of my personal favorites, which I'll be using over and over in this episode, exposed. That is what vulnerability feels like. It feels like exposure. It feels like a light is being shown on your most prized possessions, whether they exist in the material or immaterial world. Exposure can happen when you say something to someone, painting you in a different light than what you represent yourself to be. And then suddenly, the room around you now knows the truth of who you are on a heart and a soul level. Exposure can also happen when you say nothing at all, when you're complicit in your fears of being exposed. The very thing that you fear is actually written in your inability to object. Exposure can also be material, like the time when an old friend of mine thought it would be funny to pants me, because those kinds of exposures are fun for some, although they can be quite embarrassing for others. Now, I think if we were to look at our lives, we can probably name many times that we felt exposed or maybe felt the fear of being exposed. And I'm willing to bet more often than not that exposure wasn't a physical one, but it was probably more immaterial. It was more on a heart and soul level. Vulnerability, defined by Pastor Jerry Flowers, is the capacity to be wounded. Now, I particularly love that definition, or that iteration of the definition of vulnerability, because that word capacity is just so rich. It's just full of breadth and possibility, right? There's a possibility to be wounded. There's also a possibility not to be wounded. However, though, it is defined, vulnerability is something that we have, which is optional, with people that we trust, that is relational, that could lead us to our detriment. Of course, that's conditional, and can be used for our advancement. That is circumstantial. All in all, vulnerability, though treated optionally, is a very big facet of our finite quality as living beings, human, animal, and vegetative, right? We all are facing vulnerabilities. An inherent quality of being created, or should I say existing in the state that we exist in now, means that we are vulnerable of being uncreated. And I think that that's a fear that's living really deep inside of all living beings, is the end. So we do everything to stave off the end. We are in danger, of course, every day, both physically and metaphysically, of being exposed or hurt or worse. Each day is this fight, unless you are able to, of course, exist in safety, that you won't be exposed. It's a fight not to be exposed. And if you can exist in a space where your exposure or your vulnerability is a good thing, that's wonderful. But in some places, it's an opportunity for others to have their way. So that is what we are going to speak about briefly today, but in the reverse, actually, of that. And it's, are the people that you love able to be vulnerable and exposed with you? So let's relate. I grew up like most people, I think, have grown up with a moderate ability to be vulnerable with my family members. really my parents, right? Particularly my parents. Parental figures, I think, are very different from siblings in that that is the one relationship that typically is very vertical. We have parental or guardian figures, and they usually aren't the ones that we're bearing our all or our innermost to in the first years of our life. I think literally like the first 18 years. Yes, they may be the ones that we share close intimacy with and should be, but there are thoughts that maybe we have all had or questions that we have had, we've pondered, and maybe instead of taking it to our parents, we took it to our friends first to see if maybe they had gleaned something from another friend or maybe from their parents or something, right? You may have been met with resistance when trying to insert yourself into an adult conversation, hearing from adults in the other room, and then what do they tell you? Stay in a child's place or go to your room or something like that. Because whatever they were sharing with each other would be actually too much to expose you to. It would be too expository for your young and impressionable mind, or at least they thought it would be, right? Your guardians were likely to protect you from knowing too much too soon or involving and burdening you with more than your young mind should be capable of bearing. And that's fine. I think I do believe in that. I think I do believe in that after having nannied and tutored and babysat many children in my life. There's definitely certain things that they don't need to be privy to so early. I do think, though, sometimes that approach leaves more questions and more vulnerable inquiries on the table than maybe there should be, because sometimes we don't exercise the slow release of information to these kids. We always treat them like kids forever, like babies forever, and they're not. They need to be armed and equipped with knowledge so that they don't have to go out into the world and get it first. And that vulnerability is not necessarily built through a foundation of trust, and it hasn't been exercised or hasn't been expanded. So naturally, what happens is they outsource. Today's kids will go to social media, they'll go to AI, they'll go to social platforms to find out and experience outside of the confines of a safe place for their vulnerability. And that exposure that they see or that they have, right? It's not necessarily exposure of themselves, but others being exposed, or the exposure of learning new things. Others may be vulnerabilities that they're learning from. They will then develop their own as a result. So I want to ask, what about the relationships that do allow the space for you to exercise your vulnerabilities? I have experienced only a few of those throughout my life where I have felt close to total safety, and not only safety, but protection in my vulnerability. And what a beautiful thing that is to have experienced, though it was very rare. And I've only had a few people that I've been able to have that type of experience with. Have you ever thought to yourself if you are good landing ground for other people's vulnerabilities? An old best friend of mine told me something a long time ago that changed the way that I viewed myself and the way that others experience me in friendship in general. She said to me that I come off as judgmental. And in that moment, it hit me that a judge is no fun to be around. They aren't the type of person that you would seek to tell your innermost secrets to. Rather, you would have to tell your innermost secrets because you are sworn into oath not to lie to a judge whose general disposition lords over the fate of your life. A judge is not a friend. A judge is a decider of justice. A judge is a divider of fact and fiction. A judge is not a resting place for your vulnerability, nor is it their job to care about it, though they will judge the exposure of your truth. So in that moment, I felt exposed because it was actually something that I was struggling with. Now, I don't want to be judged by my friends. I want to also not be a judge of my friends. I want to be a soft landing ground for my friends to come to me, to share openly, to grieve openly, to be confident and secure and exposing themselves with me, not for the sake of getting the tea, but for the sake of being able to provide one, a listening ear, but help if they need it, right? And I wasn't perfect then in doing that, nor am I perfect now. But her shining that light on me helped me along in my journey of self-introspection. I believe introspection is one of the first things that you need in order to be a safe ground or a safe landing place for others to lay their vulnerabilities on. And this means that you must have this ability to inspect your own fruit, to look at yourself consciously and find out how you are appearing to others, right? Maybe that is through asking questions, but even just wanting to know is already the introspection beginning. It's already the fruit inspection beginning. And this means each and every blemish you have is acknowledged, not as an excuse for how you show up relationally or any other way. And it's also not an explanation, but it is a launching pad for growth and refinement. My friend highlighting, exposing me, and ultimately shining this light on what she felt was an underdeveloped area of my life, which is grace and which is vulnerability, right? Because there's the reason why I was a judge is because I didn't want to be vulnerable. Hello. Okay. But that has helped me to the truth, though the journey has been a very long one. I have been able to reconcile with the fact that one of my saboteurs, and I think it is my strongest saboteur, is actually judgment. I have struggled with being hypercritical of myself. Therefore, that is the filter through which I loved others. What's within our heart, out of the abundance of the heart, right? What is within your heart is going to come out. That's why we guard it. She was the only one who told me this, though. And perhaps others maybe had this thought or maybe not, but she was the one who shared this with me. And it helped reveal to me that I had a lack of vulnerability with myself. I didn't allow myself to get intimate with me. And therefore, I projected that onto others, right? The next way that I think is a great way to become safe for others to be vulnerable with you is to let them. Just let people without needing to change them. Just let them be. Every day we are adjusting for our comfort, and by proxy, by mere close association with the ones we love most, we want them to adjust too in order for us to feel safe, for us to feel secure, for us to feel certain and significant, and so forth. Have you ever had a relationship with someone who nitpicks every little thing that you do? They scrutinize everything, they call everything out, they make a big deal of it, and just flat out make you out to be this inconvenience to them. They may try to control the way that you speak or express yourself. They may even go as far as telling you how you should act and how you should respond to them. And maybe that person has just, been through some things. And I think we have all been that person at some point in time in our life. And I don't mean, I don't mean relationships where obviously these behaviors are abusive, right? I'm talking about more generally. But I really mean with a peer, someone who is lateral to you, who says that they are a lover or a liker of you, and they are just bent on completely misunderstanding your character and villainizing it. Imagine how restricting that might feel. Imagine if you were that person to someone. And perhaps you haven't embodied all of those qualities. I hope not, but maybe some of them. How can that person that you claim to like and love feel safe with them expressing their vulnerabilities to you when you nitpick, when you're critical, when you're constantly directing them, when you're constantly making them adjust? How can they feel safe and comfortable to do that? If you are a critic of what is readily available in that room, why would they expose themselves to you? Why would they be vulnerable with you? Why would they let themselves get hurt potentially? Everyone needs to change, right? Everyone has something about themselves that could be refined, that could metamorphose into something better. Everyone could use growth, but unless your people are harming themselves or others and or seeking help for change, you can actually just love them in their change. You can love them to change without needing them to become someone else for you so that they can be worthy of your love. I have really learned this lesson from the other way around, actually. I didn't learn it from being the hypercritical micromanager of my people, of my friends or loved ones. I actually came to understand this from being the ultra scrutinized. And what it exposed me to was ways about myself that I mirrored or mimicked that person. And that confounded me, right? Usually it's those things that really bother us that also are living within us, even if they're dormant. And once I saw it, I realized that I did not want to ever be even a small portion of that. And that treatment taught me how to love people as they are, to love them to liberty. Now, perhaps when you reflect on this, you think, am I loving people to freedom? Am I loving them to freedom, or am I loving them into a cage? Can I love them without them needing to change anything about themselves? Can I let them for real and love them for real? The scripture says that love is patient and it is kind. And you know the rest. I quote this all the time. Not only as a reminder, of course, to you and I, but as a declaration of the truth. Factually, we love people to our levels of comfort and our ability to be vulnerable with them. But God says love is long-suffering. It is not comfort-seeking. God says love doesn't keep record of wrong. It's not a tit-for-tat tally chart. Let them be and still love them. And hopefully that example of genuine, unbiased love influences change in them. But remember that it's not up to you to change them and change their heart. It's up to you to love them, even if they're unlovable. Lastly, I want to say you should lead by example. Not everyone is capable of on-the-spot vulnerability, of course. We've all been through things, so I don't expect people to just like open up to me, although they usually do. When you listen to people and you just let them speak, they usually will open up. But you have to be a safe space for that, right? You can't be just seeking the tea. Like, you really have to be a safe place for people to want to lay their burdens, right? And listening is a really great way, like active listening. I would say that I've only ever encountered, though, a few people who were exemplary, right? Were those types of people who were open books, where they didn't apologize for where they came from or what they've been through or what they're currently living in. You know, I seldom meet people whose walls are down or their doors and their windows are open for me to peer inside of their house. And rarely do you meet people who are unguarded. You know, the Bible tells us to guard our hearts, so I'm not suggesting that we go unguarded, but what I am noting is that I have only met a few people who are willing to expose themselves without needing to develop a deeper level of connection to do so. But what if you were vulnerable first? What if you say you love them first, that you're interested in them first? What if you offer your story or your desire for deeper connection or even an apology first? We're always waiting on others to expose themselves to us, but we never want to be the first one. Much of what we do is wait on others to initiate, to bear all, to profess, to confess, because we have this deep need for reciprocity. We have this deep need for others to go first, and then we will bounce off of them and match their energy. Reciprocity makes us feel like we aren't losing anything in the game, but why would you being vulnerable be considered a loss? Why would offering yourself up for deeper connection ever be a loss, especially when it's done in earnest? For me personally, it feels like rejection if it's not reciprocated. And I think that's the reason why we often don't go first. It feels like a negative reflection on my worth and my value and my significance if they don't repeat the thing back to me. And God really helped me figure that out over these last 4 years after my situation, is how to really love people without the need for them to replicate what I'm doing. And that's love, right? It's love is not a ping pong match. It's not tennis. You know, it's not this back and forth like all of the sports that we play. It's really like running. You start and you go. And you just keep going towards the mark. That's what love is. But if we feel like we are not significant to them, we don't want to be the first one to run. We don't want to take off from those blocks. If we feel like our significance is coming from them rather than from God and through ourselves, then we won't ever be the ones to go first. God is not stingy. And this is what we learn from how he loves. He is not stingy. He is a giver. He's a lover. He's a protector. He's a corrector. And we get our identity from him. And that is abundant. And it cannot run out or lack. Our significance could never exist in lack because we are created in his image and his likeness. We are his workmanship created in Christ. And that old way of thinking, right, has passed. It has to go away. The way that we view ourselves so finitely in terms of who we are and our expected end, right? It's not anything like how God views us. So there is nothing that being vulnerable can take from you when you are offering. Your vulnerability is an addition. It's an additive. Even in small doses, it may affect change in another person. You sharing gives others the strength to share. Your courage gives courage to others to be. So yes, your vulnerability is a capacity to be wounded. It is exposure. But we are covered by God, and know that in the right context, okay, not just in any old willy-nilly exposure, but in the right context, we will be taken care of even when they don't reciprocate. So introspect. Do that. Let them, love them, let them be, and then lead by example. And remember what I said at the beginning of the episode. Vulnerability is something that we have, which is optional. Free will, with people that we trust. That's relational. It could definitely lead to our detriment, and that's conditional. And it also could be used for our advancement relationally, and that's circumstantial. All of these are in your court, and others are likely wanting you to shoot first. So, you first. And don't forget, in doing that, to love yourself first, so that you can then go and love your neighbor. I'll see you guys next time.